Hello and welcome to day 3 of our 8-day Christmas run of content. I'm going through the profiles of the forces of evil in the Lord of the Rings book. Couldn't be more excited. Same with all of it, but that's where my heart is, in the evil armies of the Lord of the Rings. I don't think before the channel I'd ever really played good, maybe in 1 or 2 narrative scenarios, but Aaron and Louis are always good. I was always evil. That was the way, honestly, for 20 years, until eventually I went to a tournament and had to paint a good army for it. But excited for this. If you're enjoying the content, please join the Patreons in showing your support. They're amazing. They keep the channel going. Get your paints out. Let's see what we've got to look at. First up is obviously the Dark Lord Sauron. So he's the same points, same stat line as he always used to be. He's still fight value 9, but crucially Gil-galad, who we've seen in the previous video, can't heroic strike now. So they're going to be locked together, and in terms of reaching his fight value of 9, it's going to be much harder for heroes as it's only D3 added on for heroic strike. The flip side is that all monsters kind of get a version of Sauron's special rule now, where if you kill the front warrior, you get a strike at the spearman. Sauron can obviously hit all of them anyway, but it does devalue his rule a little bit. I still think he's worth the points, and he's still got heroic strike. He's dominant 10, so he can now play objectives a little bit better than he used to. It depends what his actual army list looks like, but if it's similar to before, very much enjoying Sauron again. Okay, so there's quite a lot of changes here for the Witch King. So, fight value 6, very, very happy with. Dominant 3 on the Fell Beast, excellent. His spells have changed. He's got Enchanted Blades now, which is cool. His Black Dart is only 6 inches, and that's been reduced, I think, to strength 6. But it's going to be less just fly around Black Dart from 23 inches away and then fly back an inch. And you're set with certain builds. You can't take 3 might points, 1 will and 3 fate now. I guess the list is going to determine which version you take, but you're going to be more balanced. So you want to attack 1 might, 1 fate, 2 attacks, 2 might, 2 fate, with different amounts of will. And the Crown of Morgul has changed. So essentially all enemies are always going to have to take terror checks to charge him, even if they have a version of a resistance to that. And he can set his sword on fire once per game and deal some serious damage. From what we see in the film, he's not endlessly casting spells and flying about. You want him stuck in there. This is going to encourage that. Very happy with the changes. The lack of rerolls is obviously, in terms of gameplay, is less powerful than he used to be. But he was kind of an auto-include in a lot of lists. This should balance him out a little bit. So regular Ringwraiths are fight value 5 and have less spells and just generally not as good. But for the same points value, you get the same amount of attacks, might, will and fate. So you're always going to take the Witch King first. Little bit weird. Just feels a little bit strange, like, unless I'm reading that wrong. But here it's 2 attacks, 2 might, 14 will, 2 fate on a Wraith for 120 points. 2, 2, 14, 2 for 120 points on the Witch King. You're just always going to take the Witch King. Unless you don't want him to be the general. I guess he'll be forced to be the general if you've got some kind of play that involves getting really stuck in. I suppose that's the one tactical advantage. You might go for a regular Wraith over the Witch King. Gothmog's Master of Battle is no longer automatic. That breaks my heart. No. It's Master of Battle 2+, which is fine and is cheaper now. But Master of Battle was such a good rule. It's definitely more balanced now, but as a user of Gothmog, I'm sad. The rest of his rules are the same. He's great. Oh! No, he's not got Heroic Strike either. He's got Heroic Defense and Heroic March. He's much more of a leader now then. So you've got to be a little bit more careful with him. He's going to be hanging around the back of your line, using the Master of Battle, buffing the orcs around him, giving the rerolls to wound, marching, but he's not going to be going in and being a hero assassinator. which again makes sense. I mean, mine killed Glorfindel, Gildor, and Arwen, I think, in one tournament game last month. But Gothmog is different now. Gitz has lost a point of might. Otherwise, he's the same, except he also gets +1 fight value when fighting a man. That's good. Gitz was an auto-include before. It's 3 points of might and the Master of Reserves. You're always taking him over a captain. Now at least you've got a bit of a decision to make. There's going to be a lot less might in the army of Gothmog if that exists anymore. You've got 3 on Gothmog, 2 on Gitz, and 1 on the Enforcer, and obviously Goroth and Zagdush don't exist anymore. The big strength of that list used to be just piles of might. In the endgame, you just have might everywhere. You could heroic combat through people, or certainly how myself and Leon used it. It's very different now. I guess it's just about masses of troops, which is how it should be. It's just going to take some getting used to. Right, Gothmog's Enforcer needs a buff. Let's see how he's changed. He's still a bit underwhelming for me. He's fight value 4, strength 4, defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, heroic defense, and then he's got 3 will points. If he's within 3 of Gothmog, Gothmog can use the Enforcer's will to declare heroic moves and heroic marches, and he can extend his standfast. He's definitely the 3rd name on the list after Gothmog and Gitz, but in truth, I'd probably rather take a Morannon captain as well. It's a shame. I'd like to have seen him used a bit more. If he was 10 points cheaper, I wouldn't have a problem, but 55 points seems a little bit steep. Mouth of Sauron has had a little buff. He's got better spells now, so he's got Drain, Courage, Curse, and Transfix. Curse being the one where you can remove the opponent's fate points. He also stops enemies re-rolling wands within 6 inches of him. That's fine. There are a lot of rules like that in the game now. Heroic March, Heroic Channeling. It's pretty good. He's pretty good. 25 points for an armoured horse, so he's going to be 100 points on horse. I do think we're going to see a lot more foot-orientated armies. But I like him. He feels like a good balanced profile. You're going to be looking at the Blackgate Opens or whatever that equivalent is and thinking, do I want to include the Mouth of Sauron? And the answer will mostly be yes, but sometimes be no. To me, that says he's well pointsed. Shelob. Ooh, quick look at the stat line. I was expecting Shelob to go up to 2 attacks, and she hasn't. She's got the old Cirith Ungol bonuses, so she gets an extra attack against man, elf, dwarf, or hobbit models. She can remove a friendly model within an inch of her to allow her to re-roll a jewel dice, essentially giving her a banner benefit. She's got Venom, which is a little better than it used to be now. She can't benefit from other models' heroic actions. That's fine. Actually, well, that's quite big, really. I don't know if that was the case before. I never really used her, but she's got no might herself, and now she can't benefit from a heroic move. That might be a bit of a leveler there. She's also got this Caught in a Web where instead of making strikes, you can make the model take a strength 8 hit and then paralyze them. She's got Dominant 4, Monstrous Charge. She can run over things. 7's on the profile, 10-inch move. Good, solid hero. I assume she's only going to be available to Cirith Ungol, but I like her a lot. Some of these new profiles are so cool. Shagrat used to be a hero that you just had to include because he was so powerful and you couldn't dismount him essentially because his shield of Cirith Ungol was always knocking you over. But it didn't match what we see in the film. We've now got a Shagrat profile that matches what we see in the film, and some of his special rules are really cool. So he's fight value 6, strength 5, defense 5, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, heroic challenge, heroic strength, and heroic strike. He's a general hunter, so if he kills the enemy leader, he gets a point of might back. That's replaced blood and glory in a lot of places, but that was a slightly overpowered rule before. And then he's got 2 really cool rules. Cleaving Blow, if he ever rolls a natural 6 to wound, it causes 2 wounds instead. That's fine. And then this is the cool one. Hands off that shiny shirt, that's mine. During a scenario that involves picking up and carrying objectives, Shagrat can take an intelligence test if he's within 3 inches of a friendly model that's carrying the objective. If he passes it, he gets control of the objective, and he can always carry multiple objectives, even if you wouldn't normally be able to. That's just thematic and really good for the game. He's going to be really interesting to use. You're going to want him on the front line, but then all of a sudden he's going to be target number 1 if he's got 3 objective markers and there's 6 on the board. Interested to see what scenarios that's going to correlate to. But very, very happy with Shagrat. Very thematic. Looking forward to seeing the Cirith Ungol Legendary Legion. From seeing the profiles, I'm leaning toward that at the moment. Gorbag and Shagrat are my new favourite heroes. Gorbag's gone up to fight value 5, and when he's outnumbered he goes up to 3 attacks. The rest of his stat line is the same. He's got an extra will point actually, I think. He's got Heroic Strike and Heroic Challenge. He's also got this adaptive fighter rule where basically if you're fighting near the edge of a ledge, or well anywhere, Gorbag can choose to back an enemy model away, and he can back them over ledges so they take falling damage. He can then strike at everybody else in the combat. A bit like in the scene in the film where he kicks the guy through the window. Very, very cool. Very thematic. All 3 of those, Shelob, Shagrat and Gorbag. I'm very much leaning to making an army like that. Mordor captains haven't changed, although they now come with a shield and they can't take wags and things like that. To be expected. Bit of a shame, but it is what it is. Orc warriors are the same as they've always been, but obviously we've got this equipment option split, so your spear guys are just going to have spears. They're not going to have spears and shields, for example. The Wag Riders are the same, and then the Mordor Catapult has had a debuff in that they've changed the rules for siege engines, so they now fire in a 45-degree arc, so you can't just put your catapult in the corner of the board and say, right, I can hit the whole battlefield now. You've actually got to position it a little bit, so it can still reroll to hit. It's got a 2-inch radius on its shot, and the severed heads is 3 inches. Still got a troll defending it, and the troll is more powerful than it was, and the catapult itself is cheaper. I think Leon's still planning to take 2 to the GT, so I'll reserve judgment until he's taken those, and we'll see how they do. So Morannons now all get Gurrit's a special rule. So Morannon Orc captains are exactly as they have been, but if they're fighting a man model, they get +1 to their fight value. That's exactly the same for the Morannon Orc warriors. Same equipment options, same stat line, but they get +1 fight value against men. Combined with Gothmog giving them +1 to wound and then potentially re-rolling. This is very much an anti-man faction. I guess it's so that they match with Warriors of Minas Tirith at the Battle of Pelennor Fields, but against Rohan, these guys are just going to carve through them. Or Lake Town, something like that. Mordor Uruk-hai all have Cleaving Blow, which was the one that Shagrat had. So if they roll a natural 6 to wound, they cause 2 wounds instead of 1. That's crazy. Does that make these guys like anti-monster? Are they anti-hero? I guess the heroes can still prevent it with fate. But like a double 6 against the Theoden, Theoden's dead if he's still got 1 fate. Can't remember, but you get the point. That's crazy. Troll Chief, fight value 8. So I guess he's got a better Aragorn because he betters him at the Black Gate. Aragorn could obviously heroic strike up, but you want that battle there. Fight value 8 though, crazy. Dominant 4, regular Mordor Trolls, Dominant 3. They've both got 4 wounds. And Mordor Trolls are cheaper. So Mordor Trolls are cheaper with more wounds. And they can hit spears now. And they can hold objectives. You're going to see a lot more monsters in this edition. I mean, that's not news. Everybody knows that. But this is good. I love the idea of a Black Gate list. Black Gate has always been my favourite evil army along with Ugluk's scouts. I might have to bring them out again. I might go Men of the West and Blackgate for the GT. If Aaron's doing Riders of Aemir and Uruks, which I think he is, that'll be quite a cool thematic pairing. And what it does mean I'll be able to do is paint up a load of more Morannons, which can contribute to a future Battle of Pelennor Fields, or maybe even a Blackgate itself. Right, that's the end of the Mordor section. Easterlings and specters are still listed as Mordor, but this is orcs and Uruk-hai done. The profiles that jump out to me most so far are Gorbag and Shagrat. Gothmog changing to be just a different style of play, or a more focused style of play. You're probably using them the same way as you were, but you haven't got the fallback of being able to heroic strike. And then these trolls are just beasts. And there's so much more to go. I can't believe how much they've changed. It's crazy. Specters are largely the same. They're checking against the opponent's intelligence. I can't remember their basic stat line from the previous edition, but they look like they're going to function in the same way. Easterlings are now fight value 4. They're still the evil equivalent to Minas Tirith, and they can still phalanx and take halberds and shields. We're going to have to wait for the Armies of Middle-earth book that's coming out before we know more about the Easterlings, but they're going to get fleshed out an awful lot, I imagine. What you've not got here is a Black Dragon upgrade. We don't see those in the film. We know they're not being retired, so they will exist. As will the Acolytes, as will Cataphracts, Borgir, Rutabi, the Emperor, Amdur. There's going to be plenty of Easterling action in the new book. Right. Isengard. And Isengard has been my play style for a while now. Ugluk Scouts is always my go-to. I just want to have a bit of fun. I've taken Wildmen and Saruman to GT and Throne of Schools, definitely. Maybe another one as well. And then my other list is Blackgate Opens. So let's see how Isengard's changed. And I have seen the Saruman list with the spells. Very excited to actually look at that in detail, but let's go. So Saruman has had a bit of a debuff. He's got his Palantir, he's got the same stat line he always used to have, and he's still got his Standfast that affects heroes, but instead of being able to re-roll casting dice, he now picks one enemy hero and they get -1 to resist test. So yes, he can still toy with a Theoden thematically, but he's not going to be as good on the battlefield as he was before, although like I say, I have seen hints of the, I think it's called Muster of Saruman list, where he's going to get a bit of a buff anyway. He's still got his 18 inches on his spells as well, and he's still casting them relatively easily. But this edition isn't all about magic, to be honest, anyway. And I guess if there's more monsters, the magic inherently is going to become more powerful. So there's probably a balancing there. But I need to play a few editions or I need to play a few games or a few tournaments to know. Good to see Grimmer Wormtongue hasn't changed. He's always felt thematic and he's stayed pretty much the same. Lurtz has gone up to fight value 6. He can throw his shield now. He's got sharpshooter, so he'll be able to pick horse or rider. He's still got find the halflings. I can't remember if that was Legendary Legion or his specific rule, but it means on Maelstrom he can determine when and where his warband moves on. And he's got this Oblivious to Pain 6+ save. He's great. From the edition before last, where he was essentially an Uruk-hai captain, he then got a little buff, he's got another buff, he's still only 100 points. He's a good, solid leader option now. And what he should be. He's a match for Boromir, or Boromir of Gondor, the one with no fate, which is exactly what he should be, and Aragorn will just walk through him, which is also exactly what it should be. Ugluk's had a buff, he's now 75 points. He's got his Head Taker rule, where he can remove a friendly model to make people pass standfasts, but he can also remove an Orc Warrior model to give Uruk models within 6 inches of him the Fearless rule and +1 to wound. That's really good. There's going to be a time and a place for that, but having a few orcs in and around your Uruk-hai line in your Ugluk Scouts list and taking one off is probably a viable option if you're facing something like dwarves with a high defense. If you can get the 6 needed down to a 5, it'll be well worth it. I'll definitely be doing that every turn as well. It's very killy, and it's a legitimate way of killing yourself to win a game, which, as Aaron and Louis know, is my best way to win. Sorry, I mean, this is the page where I'm at. This is Ugluk Scouts. This is Ugluk, Grishnak, and Snaga. Grishnak's gone down to 2 might. No, and so Snaga. It makes sense, but oh no. Grishnak's got his own little brutal power attack now, essentially. If he's in a one-on-one, he can roll a dice on a 4+, he can knock the enemy model over, and then they count as trapped. And I guess his backstabber's rule will then kick in as well, so he's going to be doing some serious damage. He's still only 2 attacks, but he's got Heroic Strike. He's okay. Snarga's had a little bonus. Whenever Snarga benefits from the heroic action of another friendly hero, he may roll a d6 on a 5+, he can regain a point of might spent earlier in the battle. He can also still withdraw from taking part in with me's and things like that. His basic stat line is as it was, but is down to 2 might. Uruk Scout captains are the same as they've always been, but unlike the Mordor captains, they don't have this cleaver special rule, so there's no causing 2 wounds when they roll a 6. I was expecting the scouts to be move 8, so I'm just going to check Lurtz. No. I was expecting the scouts to be move 8, but the scouts themselves are the same as they've always been. Uruk-hai Berserkers are the same as the last edition. I was hoping there'd be something where they could ignore barricades like the Acolytes do. If you imagine the scene at Helm's Deep, the Berserkers that come over the wall, they just jump over and start chopping at the elves. But I'm very happy with this, and obviously they've still got their making strikes against everybody in combat. So when they are on the walls at Helm's Deep... Oh, they're fight value 5! Nice. So when they are on the walls at Helm's Deep, they can now tie with the elves. If they win the roll-off, they're then going to be striking out against everybody. And they've got their 2-handed weapon. Now, if they roll a 6, will always be a 6. That's a 2-handed weapon rule. So actually, they've had a little bit of a buff, even though it doesn't seem it. But if you're against a load of Gladrim, or even Minas Tirith warriors, roll your 2 dice. Hopefully you're in range of a banner. Gamble on the 6. Swing out. Take a hit at everybody. Rule of cool always wins. It might not be the best way to play them. You're probably better off putting pikes behind them, but just send the Berserkers in, go 2-handed, see what happens. Uruk captains are the same as they've always been, but they've got shield wall now. Same with Uruk-hai warriors, who have always been a staple of like the benchmark of a good infantry warrior. Well, they've just got slightly better. I guess they're defense 7 now in shield wall, which just seems crazy, but then their fight value is now the same as a Minas Tirith warrior or an Easterling. But that's going to make them pretty good. You get a couple of pikes behind them, shield wall on the front, like that. The ballista's gone up in points, and obviously it's still got this firing arc issue. I'm not going to go through the whole demolition charge, but I'm assuming that's the same as it is now, which is perfectly fine. Sorry if it's not. Ooh, Sharku's had a little buff. So he's 70 points now, but he comes with his WAG, which would be 20. So he's probably similarly costed to how he was before. He's got this Fury of the Pack rule now. Whilst he has the cavalry keyword, he increases his fight value to 5 and his attacks to 3. When he charges. So if he's charged, is 2 attacks, but when he charges in, is 3 attacks and fight value 5. He's still got his little riding dagger. He's got Heroic March and Heroic Strike, which is important because he needs to be able to match Aragorn, and with a good Heroic Strike roll, he could match Aragorn. As far as I'm aware, Isengard Wag Riders are the same as the Mordor Wag Riders, but I'm appreciating them being in the book twice. That was the worst thing about the old books. The cave troll was like with Angmar, and you always wanted it in Moria, and the Ringwraiths was scattered everywhere. They've just printed it twice. Very much appreciating that Games Workshop. I guess that's one of the small benefits of there being less profiles in here. Isengard Orc Captain is the same as a Mordor Orc Captain, but it can take a WAG. There's still no official model for that. I'm assuming it's because we need to have Orc Captains for the Sharku Legendary Legion that I presume is coming. Without that, it'd just be piles of WAGs, and Sharku, it wouldn't work. Crebain are still great, but they're much worse because they now have the Beast keyword, and that's not going to let them carry objectives. So it's more thematic. Why would you send your crow to destroy a supply? But they are going to be worse in terms of gameplay. What they are now is probably spear support removers or ways of trapping models. Fly them over the back, trap the enemy in, get the kills, and use them that way. rather than fly off and grab objectives. And obviously they can still hold objective markers, I think. I think they just can't pick up and carry things. I'm going to check that now. Yeah, so having the beast rule just means they can't be untrained crew. I don't know if anybody's tried to fire a catapult using crows, but you can't do that now. And also they can't carry objectives. They still can go and claim objectives for you though. They just can't pick up and carry objects. Which was a little overpowered before. You'd go get it, fly around, and it didn't feel great. But I have done that before. So I'm on the Wildman Oathmaker, who's one of my favourite models in the whole game. And in his rules, Saruman's actually got a little bonus. While Saruman is alive on the battlefield, the Wildman Oathmaker and friendly Dunland models re-roll rolls of a 1 when making strikes. So obviously Saruman's had his little debuff. That puts him up a little bit more, at least when you use him with the Oathmaker and the Dunlanders. His profile is largely unchanged though. Still got his 3 might. Still not got Heroic Strike. He's got Hatred Rohan, and he's crucially giving Fearless to the models around him. That's what really made him good. Ooh, Wildman Chieftain. No picture. Maybe it'll be a skull-wearing model from the War of the Rohirrim film. I would very much appreciate that. Or maybe it's just a conversion, but either way, happy to see Wildman Chieftain. I love the rules for flaming bands. I had seen these in advance, but basically a flaming brand gives you terror to cavalry and beasts, and crucially lets you count as 2 models instead of 1 when holding objectives. Obviously that's not going to apply in all scenarios, but in the same way you might want a banner for victory points in certain scenarios, you might just want a couple of flaming brands in case those scenarios come up. They've also got the options for light shields, and being able to shield is huge. I will probably be taking light shields on a lot of my models. I know lots of people will think, oh, you may as well just take an extra man. It's a 1/5 of the points cost. Every 5 you can have an extra warrior. But being able to shield, to not have to kill, to not end the game is crucial. And on your flanks, these guys can have spears now. So you can spear wall down the middle. On your flanks, shield. You're getting the same amount of dice. It's going to let you pick and choose your fights a bit more. Big fan of those. And a big fan of them not going up to defense 4. You should still just be wiping the floor with Wildmen every time you win a combat. Loving the rules for light shields and flaming brands. And Wildmen in general. I'm a big fan of Wildmen if you've watched the channel for a while. And I'm very happy to have the new models. Okay. The Hill Tribes. So this is the War of the Rohirrim now. Fight value 6, 3 attacks on Wolf, 3 might, 3 will, General Hunter, Hatred Rohan, and can re-roll 1s when engaged with an enemy hero. He's got a pretty solid profile. It's not super exciting, but what it is beginner friendly. And as he's in the starter set, I think that makes sense. So what you've got next is Freka, General Targ, and Lord Thorn. All really, really cool models. General Targ stood out in the film for me as one of my favourite characters as well, so I'm excited to get him on the battlefield. They kind of combine together to create this kind of ball of death. So they're all fight value 5, all strength 4. Thorn and Freka are defense 6, whereas Targ is defense 5. Their auto attacks 2 wounds, and they've got Targ and Lord Thorn have 2 might. Freka's got 3. So similar-ish profiles, 80, 80, 70 points. And what they all have is Hatred Rohan and then a way of buffing the models around them. So Freka gives +1 fight value to Dunland warriors within 6 inches of him. And if the enemy general is removed as a casualty whilst within 6 inches of Freka, Freka then becomes a 6-inch banner. I like that risk reward. He's going to make you think, how close do you go to the enemy general who's likely going to be a better fighter to try and get the 6-inch banner effect, which is obviously huge. I'm surprised he hasn't got 3 wounds, but maybe that's Games Workshop moving away from larger characters just having more wounds. Being fat doesn't make you any more resistant to a sword, so I guess that's that. General Targ's got Master of Battle 4+, but he can give Dunland warriors rerolls of a natural 1 when making strikes. and Lord Thorn can give Rohan traitors +1 fight value. So together, I think you're encouraged to ball up in this kind of 6-inch mob and just steamroll around the battlefield, which is cool. I'm not in love with any of their profiles, but I like the overall idea of just being this mob and just getting stuck in with a load of wildmen. So we've got Hill Tribes Chieftains again, same as Wildman Chieftain. Hill Tribesmen, same as Wildmen of Dunland. And then Rohan Traitors, who are the same as Rohirrim. Ooh, then it's Shank, Rot, and the Snow Troll. These didn't appear in the film anywhere near as much as I thought they would. So interesting to see what they're going to do here. Bear with. Okay, there's a lot going on with Shank and Rot and the Snow Troll. Firstly, it's 150 points for all three. There's no just taking the Snow Troll. That seems cheap. Obviously, it depends what army list they fall in, but I can see these guys being quite popular. Between them, they've got 3 might points. Otherwise, they're kind of standard orc profiles, but it's the special rules that are going to set them apart. Shank has Heroic Strike, and when he slays a model in combat, he can roll a dice. On the roll of a 6, he's found a trinket of some sort, ring, whatever Mordor wants with those. And then as long as either him or Rot are alive at the end of the game, you can get a victory point up to a maximum of 5. So if the objectives go and destroy the supply on the other side of the battlefield, and you've not got an army with any mobility to get there, if Shank gets enough kills, bearing in mind he's got a spear, so in theory he could stay behind the line, and if he gets a 6 or 2, you might not need to go for the objective that's over in the far corner there, or in domination if somebody's put one right at the back of the board. Interesting. He can also call the beast, so if Shank's within 6 inches of the Snow Troll, he can make it so the troll has to charge, but when it does, it re-rolls all failed wounds when it's rolling to wound and gets fearless. Rot's got Fight 4, Strength 4, Defense 5, 3 attacks, 2 wounds, 1 might, 1 will, 1 fate. Heroic Strength, so not Heroic Strike. He can loot bodies as well, so when he kills, he can roll the natural 6 and try and get victory points. And there's a special rule called Tasty Fingers, where there's an assumption here he's going to eat parts of his opponent. But when he's killed a model, on a 4+, he can get a wound or a fate point back that is previously lost. So every time Rot makes a kill, he rolls a dice. On a 6, he gets a victory point, and on a 4+, he gets a wound or a fate back. The Snow Troll is fight value 6, strength 6, defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds. So you're talking like an old-fashioned cave troll, albeit with a bigger base and defense 7. Dominant 3, causes terror, mountain dweller, so it can climb. And crucially, on a turn that it charges, it gains a bonus of +1 attack and +1 to its fight value. Bearing in mind that when Shank calls it, it can also re-roll all failed wounds. It could be getting 4 attacks at fight value 7. It's a beast. 150 points does not seem a lot for what you're getting there, but it depends how it's going to fit into the army list. And they're not leading any other troops, so you're going to be at least another 50, 60 points for another hero. And then your troops, so 800 point game, they're definitely going to be in whatever list they're in. Anything less than that, I guess there's a decision to make, which I guess is what we want. But really, really like those. Looking forward to getting my hands on them. And definitely want to play them out against Helm as well. Okay, so next up it's the Misty Mountains. But in terms of what jumps out about Isengard, I'm enjoying the little changes to Grishnak and Snaga from a thematic point of view. Sharku's really good now. I'm glad the Oathmaker hasn't changed too much. And just Wildmen as viable options. But the most exciting for me out of that bunch is Shank, Rot and the Snow Troll. Okay, the Misty Mountains. And we start with the Balrog. The first thing that jumps out is it's still fight value 10. Oh, it's move 8. Move 8, that's very cool. Otherwise, it's the same as it currently is. This is one of the few profiles in the game I was hoping would change, only from the point of view of Gandalf beats her on Xeric Sigil, so we can assume that that's Gandalf the White if you want, instead of Gandalf the Grey, but it still needs to be beatable, and that's not the case here. I think I would have rather increased its attack power massively but lowered its wounds, something like that. But what it is still that imposing presence. When you put it on the table, it's still, whoa, there's a Balrog. And points wise and all that kind of stuff, very happy with it. That is one of the few profiles I would have changed. The Watcher hasn't changed much at all. First of all, it's dominant 6. Otherwise, it's pretty much exactly the same as it always was. 6 attacks, 6s across the board. If you reduce its wounds to 3 or less, its attacks go down to 3 or less, and it can shoot D6 tentacles every turn and drag things into combat with it. But crucially, you're dragging things into combat with the Watcher. Even if it means you're touching another model, you just separate that model away and they're only fighting the Watcher. They're curled up in its tentacles and they're battling against the Watcher. It means you can't have a bat swarm waiting there, grab Gil-galad, pull him into the Watcher and the bat swarm. The bat halves its fight value and the Watcher just eviscerates him. Problem solved. Love it. And he's still a great profile. I think even at 200 points, he's still very, very good. And at 200 points with 6 attacks, if he's surrounded by 12 guys and he wins the combat, he could kill 4 off the front and then potentially 3 off the back rank. He could be doing some serious damage this edition. Goblin warriors and captains are the same as they've always been. The cave troll's largely the same as it always has been. It's got dominant 3 now, strength 6, fight 6, defense 6, 3 attacks, 3 wounds. I'm pretty sure it's been that since 2002 when we first started playing. It has to take a hand and a half weapon or a troll spear. It's not burly though. So that hand and a half weapon isn't going to be super useful. I think you're going to see a lot more trolls with troll spears. But the troll spear, when it's not supporting, also gets the benefit of dealing 2 wounds rather than 1 if it rolls a natural 6 to wound. Same way as the Uruk-hai cleaver rule. Okay, the Fallen Realms. The Royal War Mumak is one of the few models I never played with or against in the previous edition. I played against a couple of regular Mumaks, but never the War Mumak leader. He's the same as he was before, I think. But obviously, Mumaks have had a huge buff. So in the new edition, if you charge into a War Beast, if your strength value doesn't equal more than their strength value, they can just trample and carry on moving. You can't just charge a goblin into the front of the Mumakil now. You're going to have to put 4 goblins in there, or it's just going to trample whatever you tried to charge it. And what I love as well is that, like with a goblin, you've got to take that terror check. You might get 2 in, and then fail with a few, and then all of a sudden, it's going again. They have to move and things like that, but what they've done for Mumaks and Warbeasts this edition, I really like. They've got dominant 10, they're large targets, everything you expect. They're largely the same as they were before. They're strength 10, defense 7, fight value 4, so you can still get in there, wade in, and make a load of wounds as long as you've got higher than fight value 4, which, especially now in the new edition, lots of models will have. But it's just about doing enough damage to make it stampede or kill it, or you're going to get trampled. Definitely want to run a couple of these just to try them out against some Rohan or something like that. Haradrim look to be the same as they always were. Again, you're not going to be taking spears and bows. I think that's a good thing. I never really liked the idea of that. Maybe you could do that in medieval warfare, but it's not something that looks great on the model. They just have spears or bows strapped to their back. So I'm here for that change. Corsairs of Umbar are fight value 4 still, which actually makes them a little bit worse. And they don't come with throwing weapons. Oh, must have bow, spear, or throwing weapon. I think you're limited to 33% throwing weapons these days, so you're going to be taking a pretty even mix of those in a Corsair list, especially without Reavers. Maybe in their list you'll be able to take 50%, something like that. But I think toning that down a little bit isn't necessarily a bad thing. And then when the new book comes out, you'll be getting Arbalistas. We've got a Corsair Ballista here. Very similar to an Uruk-hai Ballista. It gets to re-roll rolls of a 1. Very cool. Very, very cool. Hopefully we'll get a model for that. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying this run. It's been 3 days now. Day 4 will be the evil army list from the Armies of the Lord of the Rings book. We'll see you again soon.